This morning I'm going to talk about Coaster Brook Trout in Lake Superior. We'll start right off. What is a Coaster Brook Trout? I think, you'll see as an indication by the photos here, they are not really the unicorn of the north or panda of the north or some sort of thing like that. They're a migratory form of brook trout that utilizes riverine habitat as well as nearshore rocky shorelines. And there's been genetic work done now by Sylvia D'Amelio and Chris Wilson, published in 2008, showing that these are not a subspecies or some sort of unique species of brook trout, but rather they're just a regular brook trout that happen to use this variety of habitat for their life history. This is a shot from kind of maybe the mid or early 1900s. Brook trout were once common throughout Lake Superior, and today I'm going to kind of focus in on the Nipigon area, Nipigon Bay. And of course, the Nipigon River and Lake Nipigon and Nipigon Bay had a historical and still has a pretty esteemed sport fishery for brook trout. And anybody who is an angler here will probably know that in 1915, Dr. J.W. Cook caught the world record brook trout in the Nipigon River, and that fish weighed about 14.5 pounds and was 88 centimeters or 34.5 inches in length. But of course, you have a very popular fishery, dating back to as early as the early 1900s, late 1800s, and this is a good indication right here that people took that fishery to heart, and we had pretty extreme overexploitation throughout the lake. And then compounding that with habitat degradation through logging and road construction and mills and so on, we saw a drastic decline in brook trout throughout Lake Superior. And it was recognized right away in the early, mid 1900s that something had to be done, or restoration had to take place. So it was as early as 1900 that stocking started to take place throughout the lake, including in the Nipigon area. There's 118 documented historical tributaries that Coaster Brook Trout used. Nowadays, there's kind of 3 remnant stocks. There are agencies around the lake who are taking efforts to restore populations through stocking. But like I said, we're going to talk about Nipigon Bay here. This is Lake Nipigon. There's a population at Ile Royale, and then one at the Salmon Trout River. And these are documented. Of course, there's, you'll see from some of my slides in this talk that, these fish are actually more widely dispersed than what was previously recognized, I guess. So this is just a neighbor joining dendrogram, just showing some preliminary regional genetic metapopulation structure of brook trout in Lake Superior. And this was from a paper by Chris Wilson in 2008. And this just really shows, we have the Nipigon Bay fish here. These are Nipigon Bay fish. You have fish from Grand Portage, Ile Royale, and then some fish from the Minnesota shore, and then various crosses and strains that have been stocked. But this really just kind of shows the importance of both local and widespread dispersal of these fish in maintaining these populations. And of course, Ontario's current regulations, which I'll get into in a little bit, are really promoting and facilitating this dispersal and gene flow and connectivity, at least in Canadian waters and potentially throughout the lake, by protecting some of these bigger fish. So I'll just give you a quick background on kind of where we're at with brook trout rehabilitation and where I'm going to go with this talk. So in 2003, the brook trout rehabilitation plan for Lake Superior was released. Between 2002 and 2005, so kind of in an overlapping time period there, OMNRF and formed a public advisory committee to explore some management options for brook trout in Ontario waters. In 2005, a regulation came in place, sport fishing regulation, allowing the possession just of one brook trout greater than 22 inches or 56 centimeters on across the entire Ontario waters. And then in 2005, OMNR also acknowledged that down the road they should actually meet again and kind of discuss potential progress and where they had gone in the years between the regulation change and try and determine whether something was actually happening. And in this time frame from 2005 to 2011, there were several peer-reviewed papers that were published focusing on the genetics or the dispersal and movement of fish in the Nipigon system and in Nipigon Bay in particular. So just to kind of set the scene, the brook trout rehabilitation plan really focuses on maintaining widely distributed self-sustaining populations in as many of the original and native habitats as is practical. Populations should be comprised of 6 or more age classes and exhibit a genetic profile consistent with those populations currently existing in the basin. So this is in the case of stocking, which OMNR is no longer doing in Canadian waters. So to achieve these rehabilitation goals, these are the key actions that are outlined in the rehabilitation plan: providing suitable tributary habitat for spawning and rearing, appropriate genetic makeup of brood stocks, effective management of exploitation, be it subsistence, commercial, or sport fishery, adequate agency effort to resolve rehabilitation issues. So, for us, we've linked a lot of our rehabilitation work to the areas of concern in Nipigon Bay and habitat degradation that had occurred in the last 30 years. Finding the financial resources to do this type of work. The impact of Coaster Brook Trout is, comparatively small when compared to, say, lake trout or Cisco on a lake-wide basis, but they obviously play an important part. So there's always ways to find some resources to fund this work. And then trying to maintain the productive capacity of habitats in nearshore areas. So this goes back to restoring habitats. So today I'm really just going to talk about, we've done a lot of habitat work in Ontario, but I'm going to really focus in on this managing of exploitation. And that's, I think, where we've been the most progressive in terms of our regulations and our management. So just a quick review of the sport fishing regulations. And now, at one point in time, they were pretty complicated. They varied by tributary or area of the lake. But between 95 and 2004, the season was from 1st of January to Labor Day. And this is a sport fishing license versus a conservation license. So you had a possession limit of 3 fish on a sport fishing license of any size. And this was throughout the lake. And then, of course, like I said, tributaries had higher possession limits. So this was kind of the lead up to potential for regulation change. From 2000 to 2004, Nipigon Bay already had a fairly restrictive regulation in place. And they limited it to the 4th Saturday in April to Labor Day, so shortened season, and only 1 fish over 20 inches. And then the big, kind of the more global regulation that came into place in 2005 and still stands in all waters of Canadian waters of Superior is this possession limit of 1 fish, but over 22 inches. So this public advisory committee that met in that earlier time frame there decided, really what we want to try and promote is a trophy fishery, catch and release, and so that was kind of the impetus or the direction they were trying to move with this regulation change, and of course to protect the spawning stock. So I don't have a slide in here kind of summarizing what happened in our workshop in 2011, but I've kind of suggested with the genetic work and some other stuff there that, there had been a pile of stuff done, and one of the things that came out of the workshop was that we needed to continue assessment or start some assessment, more rigorous assessment, I guess, of coaster brook trout in Canadian waters to answer some questions about dispersal or life history characteristics and that sort of thing. And this is a program that was has been occurring since 1997, and sporadically in some year, from one year to the next. But this is a group of dedicated anglers, about 4 to 6 anglers that participate on an annual basis, and they're collecting information or biological information from brook trout over a relatively broad spatial scale. Most of it, again, is from Nipigon River. And these guys are, again, volunteers. They're mostly just, taking weights and lengths, or in some cases just lengths, recording their fishing effort as best as possible, and then tagging fish, which really only has the purpose of answering some questions about dispersal through tag returns. I'll show that in a minute. So between 2005 and 2014, they've sampled 668 brook trout, of which 39 fish have been recaptured, and I haven't split this out by year. Some of these are within year recaptures, the white bars. Some are between year recaptures. But the point is, we're trying to get some tags out there, inform the public that we're tagging these fish, and that if they're caught, we'd like to know about them. So this is just maybe an oversimplification, but these are some fish that were tagged by co-op anglers in Nipigon Bay. This first one here originated in the east end of Nipigon Bay, and this is a straight line distance of 160 kilometers. It was caught by Grand Portage during their spring brook trout survey. The following year that it was tagged in Nipigon Bay. We had another fish that was returned this past year from the Keweenaw. That's 170 kilometer straight line distance. And then, as John was mentioning, they tagged some coasters in Portage Creek. And this was a fish that was tagged in Portage in 1 year and caught and killed in the Agawam River that same fall. So, and that's 350 kilometers straight line distance. Of course, I don't know if they actually weaved through this island and came over here. But the point is, these fish are dispersing throughout the lake, maybe more than what was previously thought, right? The other thing that we've been trying to do, but I don't know, hasn't been overly successful, is getting these co-op anglers, these few guys, to keep track of their fish, the time that they're out fishing, and some of them do it and some of them don't. But ideally, you'd have some kind of measure if it's the same fishermen from 1 year to the next and they're all proficient at what they do. You might expect to use this as some kind of measure of relative abundance. This is just brook trout catch rates and fish per hour. Anywhere from, in recent years here, and I think this is more an artifact of environmental conditions and the number of anglers who were actually recording their effort, but 0.1 fish an hour up to 0.6 fish an hour, and obviously that varies. This is just a frequency distribution of the brook trout that are caught by co-op anglers. I think just the key thing here is that about 22% of the fish are between 20 inches and 22 inches, so previously legal fish to fish that could be harvested, and about 2.3% of the fish are greater than 22 inches. So they exist. Whether this is an artifact, whether there should be fish bigger than that or whether that's as big as these fish get, could be debated, or whether they're being cropped off at that 22-inch mark. This is just showing the mean length of fish caught by co-op anglers from 2010 to 2014, and kind of max lengths between 2010 and 2014. anywhere from 21 inches up to 25 inches or 640 millimeters in 2013. So where to with this program? I think we're trying to encourage continued participation, try to engage our stakeholders and partners and have them participate in the management of the fishery. I think this has kind of been a program that's been inherited kind of since 1997, and I think it has room to revisit the objectives and the design. Of course, it provides maybe some indication of relative abundance, the understanding of population structure, at least that of the fishable component of the population, indication of some movement and dispersal patterns or information on that, and potentially combine this with other surveys to provide a better understanding of brook trout. So the other more recent work that we've been doing has been this nearshore electrofishing survey. We've been doing it since 2011, and several other agencies around the lake who've been doing this survey, whether to monitor stocking success or monitor populations such as the one at Ile Royal. We picked this up specifically for Nipigon Bay, but I think we're going to plan on expanding it. But these are some objectives that we have outlined in a draft lake-wide standardized protocol for this survey, mostly to describe the current status and distribution of coaster brook trout populations. In this case, we're talking mostly about Nipigon Bay and the North Shore, but it could be for the whole lake. Monitor growth rates, age, recruitment, year class strength, and population trends over time, and describe and compare these biological characteristics at a lake-wide scale to try and track rehabilitation. So ideally, this is comparative data, right? We're using nighttime boat electrofishing in waters that are 2 meters in depth or less, at random and fixed sites, and they average, for us in our survey, we're doing sites that are about 1.5 kilometers in length. And so this is just a quick schematic of Nipigon Bay, and the red sites are some fixed sites that we've determined, and then annually we change these green ones to select random segments of the shoreline, and to date we've sampled about 170 kilometers of shoreline in Nipigon Bay. So this is a live well full of brook trout. Some relatively large fish. We're fishing at about 60 pulse per second in 4 amps. And we're biologically sampling these fish and applying a Floyd tag. Again, we originally kind of thought, well, we could potentially use this to derive some sort of population estimate. It's more to tag fish and engage the angling community when these fish are caught. Understand dispersal. So this is our measure of relative abundance. This is the geometric mean catch per unit effort, fish per kilometer, and the bars are standard error. And it does appear to be quite variable from year to year. Because we're in the infancy of this particular survey, we've been struggling with some logistics in 2012, so we actually didn't sample nearly as much shoreline. And then we've had a couple years of either really warm springs or really cold springs. And so even though you're doing this survey at a predetermined time, I think that's contributing to this a little bit, to this variability in relative abundance. These are some ages from brook trout caught in 2013, aged with pectoral rays from this survey. And we're catching mainly age 2 to age 7 fish. Just again, similar length frequency distribution to what we saw in the co-op angler survey. And this is all fish combined between 2011 and 2014. And obviously, electrofishing has a tendency to select for larger fish rather than small fish. So it's not that these small fish aren't out there, it's just that the gear is better suited towards larger individuals. And this technically shouldn't say growth. This is really just length-weight relationship. And that dotted line is 22 inches. And you know, you can see these large fish are approaching around 2 kilograms at that length, but there really aren't that many beyond that. So quickly, in summary, I think there's maybe some very loose evidence that the population has improved since the regulation change. Unfortunately, we don't have a whole lot of information prior to the regulation change. We have some creel information, mostly from the river and Lake Nipigon, and we've seen just a marginal increase in the number of fish over 22 inches that are being caught. But like I said, this is based on a relatively small sample size. Certainly improved understanding of the brook trout dispersal in the Nipigon Bay area and along the North Shore. Improved understanding of habitat use. So through these surveys, particularly the electrofishing survey, we're actually characterizing habitat as well, trying to develop some sort of habitat criteria or indices. And I think one of the biggest things that's come out of this assessment work is the potential for lake-wide standardization for assessing brook trout stocks. And of course, the importance of partnership with stakeholders and engaging the public in management decisions.